Bullies ripped apart. Black girl's dress. After prom, humiliation. Her spin kick left everyone in shock. You're going to regret this. Connor Blake snarled, shredding the charcoal corners of my self-portrait before tossing it like trash onto Westfield Prep Academy's polished library floor, every line I'd drawn of my own face ripped away in a heartbeat. Minutes later, the aftermath would sit at my feet, torn sheets, smudged graphite, and the quiet echo of privilege wielded like a weapon. But 2 hours earlier, I was simply Aisha Robinson, head buried in AP chemistry equations, elbows propped on a sunlit oak table, hair tied back to keep my thoughts from drifting. At 17, I knew how to stay invisible, sit in corners, speak only when spoken to, let my art do my talking. My secret, I'd trained in martial arts since I was 7, my father's legacy as an Army veteran, plus an after-school program called Girls Who Fight, had taught me discipline, respect, and that real strength was meant to protect, not to show off. And tucked into my sketchbook cover was the best piece I'd ever created, a self-portrait of me breaking free from a cage of ink and wire, symbolizing every silent girl who'd ever felt trapped. That afternoon, the library's heavy doors slammed open. Connor, quarterback golden boy, son of the biggest donor on the admissions board, strode in with Tyler Brooks and Des Johnson close behind. Mr. Fletcher, our college counselor, who'd once praised my portfolio to a Yale recruiter, looked up and blinked away from his paperwork. I sensed how the system shifted for Connor, the unspoken deal between power and protection, then forced my gaze back to my textbook. Too late. Connor's ice blue eyes found me as he flipped a chair around and slumped into it, straddling the seat like he owned every inch of the room. Prom's 2 weeks away, he drawled. You're my date. I couldn't swallow the bile rising in my throat. I already have plans, I said, voice steady, though my heart pounded. His perfect grin cracked for a second enough to see the threat behind the charm. Tyler and Des shifted, boxing me in. Think carefully, Connor whispered, leaning closer. Every college you've applied to, my dad can talk to their board. One phone call and you're off the list. My jaw tightened. Across the table, Mr. Fletcher pretended not to notice. In that moment, I realized the real fight wasn't just against Connor's fists, but against a whole institution built to protect him. Then Mia Chen appeared, my best friend since freshman year goalie of the girls' basketball team, her presence a physical shield. Connor stood, smoothed his jacket, and slipped on his practiced smile. This isn't over, he said, voice low enough for me alone. As they left, my ruined sketchbook and beaten confidence felt like collateral damage. I sank to the floor, gathering fragments of my self-portrait. Each torn edge whispered hide or fight. I chose fight. But when I logged onto my phone that night, I discovered that Connor's real assault had only just begun. My phone felt like it was on fire. I whispered into the darkness as I stared at the avalanche of notifications. By sunrise, half the student body had seen the anonymous post on Westfield Prep Confessions. Aisha Robinson thinks she's too good for our quarterback snob alert. The caption beneath the cruel caricature, me with devil horns, and a sneer cut deeper than any punch. Comments piled up, kick her out of the gallery. She only dates Ivy League losers. What does she know about real life? My heart hammered against my ribs, but somewhere deep inside, the warrior I'd trained into silence stood up. I shut off my phone, but the humiliation clung to me like wet paint. In chemistry class, Mr. Patel pretended not to notice my shaking hands. In the hallway, whispers followed me like vultures. The system meant to protect me. Teachers, counselors, even the prestigious admissions officer who once praised my work, sat silent, offering no refuge. Yet, even as shame threatened to swallow me, I felt a spark ignite. They had taken my dignity, but not my resolve. That afternoon, I slipped away to the abandoned music room in the East Wing, my secret dojo, where echoes of solo violin used to mingle with dust. As I pushed open the door, a single fragment of my self-portrait lay untouched on a broken chair, the tiniest corner that showed my eyes fierce and determined. My fingertips brushed the inked lines, and I remembered my father's words. Strength is silent until it's needed. Flickers of my childhood training flashed in my mind, the sting of sweat in dojo air, the burn of discipline, the quiet pride in every belt. Then the twist of betrayal hit me, the metadata on the confession post traced back to Mr. Fletcher's old college account. My former mentor had deleted the trace, but I saved the evidence. The very man who once championed my art was complicit in tearing it down. Rage and clarity washed over me in the same instant. This was no longer just about prom or college applications. This was a reckoning. I slid my phone into my pocket, clutched that scrap of drawing to my chest like a talisman, and made a promise at tomorrow night's spring gala. I would stand before the whole school, students, faculty, even Mr. Fletcher, and shatter the illusion that privilege grants immunity. I would reveal every lie, expose every silence, and reclaim not just my future, but the integrity of this place. As the sunset filtered through cracked windows, I exhaled ready. Tomorrow, the real fight begins. I never thought silence could echo so loud, I whispered as I stepped beneath the glittering chandeliers of Westfield Prep's spring gala, my heart drumming like war drums in my chest. The ballroom glittered with tuxedos and ball gowns, every polished smile a mask concealing alliance's secrets, and the unspoken rule that Connor Blake was untouchable. When I locked eyes on Mr. Fletcher at the edge of the dance floor, his posture, stiff guilt written in the tense set of his shoulders, I knew the system that protected him had just become my battleground. I pressed the tiny fragment of my self-portrait, a single fierce eye inked on torn paper, into the palm of my dress. It was my talisman, a silent vow forged in graphite. Around me, parents with donor badges laughed in polite clusters, oblivious to the tinderbox of scandal about to ignite at their feet. I could almost taste the metallic sting of truth on my tongue as I navigated the sea of polished surfaces and gilded tables, each one laid out like a shrine to privilege. The orchestra's strings swelled behind me, every note a countdown. Connor drifted through the crowd in his ivory suit, the picture of entitlement, his arm looped through Mia Chen's wrist like a badge of defiance. Mia had been brave enough to stand by me in the library, and braver still to join me in exposing the rot behind the school's golden veneer. Her steady gaze gave me strength. I slipped my phone out and found the time-stamped screenshot of Mr. Fletcher's confession post, feed his old college login, his cursor overpost the hidden metadata I'd uncovered in the music room. It was a betrayal that burned hotter than any physical pain I'd ever endured. As the headmistress took the stage to welcome us, I felt my palms sweat. This was my moment, no more hiding behind corners or walls. I slipped through a side door smartphone in hand and connected it to the ballroom's audiovisual system. The screen flickered to life above the stage, replacing the gala's floral montage with the anonymous confession post, only now the username and profile picture were clearly Mr. Fletcher's. Gasps rippled through the audience. Mr. Fletcher froze dumbfounded. Connor's smug expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of panic, his silent ally now exposed. I walked out onto the stage in my simple black dress, the torn edge of my sketchbook peeking from my clutch. The orchestra ground to a halt. For a heartbeat, the room held its breath. Then the murmurs rose like a tidal wave. I raised the fragment of my self-portrait high, the lone piece of my artwork that had survived the initial attack. This eye is my witness, I began, voice clear and unwavering. You tried to erase me, my art, my dignity, even my future. But every shred only sharpened my resolve. The chandelier light refracted in the glass, scattering rainbows across the marble as if the school itself was cracking open to let justice shine through. Just as I prepared to drop the final truth bomb, the admissions emails I'd already sent to the university boards, complete with evidence of misconduct, the room went deathly silent. All eyes were on me, on Mr. Fletcher, on Connor. My breath caught. In that pregnant pause, I felt the weight of every student who'd ever been hushed, every teacher who'd turned a blind eye, every heart that had been trampled under the march of privilege. And then the microphone crackled to life, As the orchestra dimmed, the room held its breath. I'm not done yet, I snapped, as the grand chandeliers above Westfield Prep's spring gala trembled with the hush that fell across the ballroom. Every polished marble surface and gilded table seemed to lean in, waiting. Just moments ago, I'd hijacked the gala's live stream, intended to showcase donor-funded scholarships to expose Mr. Fletcher's treachery. His hidden confession post, once a ghost in the system, now glowed in full resolution on the screen behind me. The metadata, his old college credentials, the timestamp all laid bare for donors, parents, and students worldwide. The gasp that rippled through the crowd felt like a physical wave crashing over me, but the piece of my self-portrait I held just one fierce inked eye felt heavier than ever. It was the sole survivor of Connor Blake's initial assault, a symbol of every young woman silenced by privilege. My voice rang out clear and unwavering. This eye has witnessed every broken promise, every silent betrayal by those who claimed to protect us. Guards materialized at the stage's edge, their polished shoes clicking a warning more than a courtesy. Dr. Reynolds, the headmistress whose speech was supposed to unify us, now stood frozen lips pressed tight. Aisha, please, this is a private event, she began, but I raised a hand, the microphone still alive in my grip. Dr. Reynolds, your seals and emblems don't absolve you of accountability, I challenged. Every time you turned away, you chose walls over justice. They built institutions to shield Connor, but humanity is not a shield, it's a responsibility. The chandelier's crystals refracted rainbows across my dress, casting fractured light as if the school itself was splintering under the weight of truth. Connor Blake's ivory suit, once enviable, now looked pallid. His jaw clenched. I could see the veins at his temples pulsing. Mia Chen, my steadfast ally, and the gala's unexpected co-star, lifted her phone to live stream my words from ground level, amplifying every syllable beyond these four walls. The red live icon blinked furiously on Connor's own device, mirroring his shock. From the front row, Mr. Blake, his father, and the event's biggest donor, rose crystal glass, suspended mid-toast. Around us, parents shifted uncomfortably. Some whispered of scandal, others of potential lawsuits. Privilege, I realized, was a brittle facade waiting to crack. Then Dr. Reynolds' voice cut through the tension cool as steel. Aisha Robinson, you are being asked to leave immediately. Your actions threaten our fundraising and reputation. My heart thundered. Expulsion threatened to erase my future. My shoulders burned with every pair of eyes fixed on me, donors who wrote checks for privilege, administrators who thrived on silence, students who watched in stunned awe. Yet in that moment, I felt the calm clarity of my martial training. Adversity was not a cage, but the forge of strength. I lifted the torn eye high, defying the guard closing in. Better expelled for courage than protected by lies, I declared. A roar of applause and shouts erupted, some furious, some liberated. As I stepped off the stage, guards at my side, the avalanche of notifications exploded, hashtags, trended news alerts pinged, and the promise of real accountability blazed across screens everywhere. Clutching the fragment of my art against my chest, I crossed the threshold into the unknown, every flashbulb and whispered promise chasing me. This was no longer a gala. It was the opening bell for a revolution. The real fight for justice had just begun. I never thought I'd see police sirens echoing through our school halls. I gasped as I burst through Westfield Prep's front doors, the torn fragment of my self-portrait clutched like evidence. Moments ago, I'd been escorted out of the spring gala by security. Now flashing lights painted the marble floor red and blue. The headmistress's words still rang in my ears. You're expelled for insubordination. But the moment the officers stepped into our foyer, my purpose crystallized. This fight was no longer just mine. It belonged to everyone silenced by privilege. Word spread instantly. Students blocked the entrance cheers, rising in defiance of the glittering donors who lingered outside. Justice for Aisha's, they chanted, their voices a turning tide against complacency. I felt the weight of their hope settle on my shoulders, an honor and a burden. Inside, I saw Brad Stevens, the head of student council, his phone raised, broadcasting live. He'd been forced to hand over footage of Connor ordering the destruction of my portfolio, the very proof needed to swing the scales. In the library, once a place of fear, I felt a surge of solidarity. Mia Chen stood by my side, her arms crossed like armor. Des Johnson and Tyler Brooks hovered at the edges, uncertain had they realized they were pawns in a game they didn't control. I caught Des's eye. His expression shifted from guilt to resolve. Even someone with privilege could change. We marched to Principal Reynolds' office, each step a declaration that harassment and blackmail had no safe haven here. The officers followed their presence, a stark reminder that institutional cover-ups carried real consequences. I handed the torn eye of my portrait to Officer Martinez, my symbolic witness. This, I said, voice firm, belongs in evidence, as does every shredded canvas, every threat message, and every silent nod of approval from those who refused to protect us. Then came the twist I never saw coming. Mr. Fletcher, once untouchable, emerged from behind his desk, eyes rimmed red. He confessed on camera unprompted that he'd manipulated dozens of anonymous accounts to discredit not only me, but other minority students. His contrition was ugly, but it cracked open the door for truth. The headmistress paled. The Board of Trustees, summoned mid-meeting, erupted in urgent whispers. Aisha's law, a draft policy punishing staff, complicity in harassment, was on Principal Reynolds' desk, ready for signature. Outside parents and media swarmed. Some shouted support, others threats. My heart pounded, but in that roar, I recognized something deeper than fear, the pulse of collective courage. With the self-portrait piece still in my hand, I looked to the students around me, the mosaic we would build from our shattered works. Today, they weren't just my witnesses. They were my comrades in arms. As Officer Martinez led me away to give a formal statement, I turned back to the crowd. Their faces blurred into a living tapestry of defiance and hope. The fight was far from over. It was only just beginning. I never imagined standing in a courtroom could feel more terrifying than training under my father's watchful eye, I thought, as I gripped the edge of the witness stand, the single scrap of my self-portrait pinned to my lapel like a battle scar. The cold fluorescent lights above me cast long shadows across the polished oak desk, where Connor Blake's father sat, gray suits and guarded expressions filling the gallery. Your Honor, the damage isn't just to paper and pixels, it's to every promise I poured into those pages. I began, my voice clear despite the adrenaline thrumming through my veins. In that moment, I felt the weight of every student who'd been silenced by privilege, every teacher who'd looked the other way. My torn artwork was more than evidence, it was my soul laid bare. Connor's defense attorney rose smooth and practiced painting me as a vengeful artist, desperate for attention. But then unexpectedly, Tyler Brooks and Des Johnson, once his loyal shadows, swung open the courtroom doors. Tyler's shoulders were squared, Des's eyes steady. I recorded every phone call, Des said, placing his phone on the desk, the files flickering on the screen. Threats, blackmail schemes, orders to destroy my laptop. Tyler stepped forward next. I helped shred the paintings. I was wrong, he confessed, voice raw. The judge leaned forward, surprise and relief mingling on her face. Privilege had tried to silence us, but the truth was louder than any legacy or lawsuit. My breath caught as I realized the twist the system designed to protect Connor was crumbling from within. The gallery erupted to gasps, murmurs of shock whispered, "Thank you, S." My heart pounded like dojo drums in my chest, every beat a reminder that courage could ignite change. I closed my eyes and pictured the mosaic of artwork students had sent me, hundreds of tiny drawings, photos and poems taped together to form one massive phoenix. In my mind, it soared above the gallows of privilege wings stretching across the courthouse walls. When the judge finally spoke, found Connor liable for destruction of property. Harassment, attempted blackmail, her gavel fell like a promise kept. Restitution to replace every shredded canvas official reprimand for every complicit educator, and a juvenile record that wouldn't vanish at 18. As I stepped down from the stand, tears blurred my vision, not of fear, but relief. The courtroom doors opened to a corridor buzzing with reporters and classmates offering congratulations, palms clasped around mine, voices light with hope. Yet, even as cameras flashed, I felt a chill. This victory in court was only one battle. Outside, the state legislature was preparing to debate Aisha's Law, a bill to protect students from institutional cover-ups, a fight that could take months. And though my artwork stood ready to rebuild the mosaic, I knew that transforming policy, reshaping hearts, would demand every ounce of the warrior I'd forged in silence. Clutching that torn fragment to my chest, I took a steady breath, bracing for the next horizon. Because justice, I'd learned, wasn't a final verdict. It was the journey of every voice brave enough to speak. They said the courtroom was the end of the story. They were wrong. I murmured as I stepped into the grand rotunda of the state capitol, the marble pillars soaring overhead like silent sentinels of power. This was where Aisha's Law would live or die, and though the torn scrap of my self-portrait shimmered in the lapel of my blazer, a knot of nerves clawed at my chest. Around me, activists, teachers, and survivors carried fragments of a student-made mosaic, tiny phoenix feathers cut from canvases. Each one a promise that from brokenness we could rise. I inhaled, recalling my father's words. Strength is silent until it's needed. I'd already battled fists, rumors, and courtroom threats. Now I would battle bureaucracy and lobbying. My heart drummed like taiko as I navigated through lobbyists in tailored suits and parents clutching donor badges. At 9:00 a.m., the gavel fell and the hearing began, but I knew the real fight for justice was only just starting. State Senator Marlowe spoke first, her tone measured. We all agree, harassment is unacceptable. Polite applause rippled through the chamber until Senator Briggs rose. His campaign coffers bulged with private school donations, and his words dripped privilege. Disputes belonged within school walls. This bill would weaken parental rights. A collective wince passed through my allies. Mia's grip tightened on my arm. Brad Stevens wiped a tear. I stepped up to the podium, my fingers curled around that inked eye from my self-portrait, and let my voice carry. A torn sketchbook is a torn promise. Conversations aren't enough when power shields the guilty. I stood before you as a victim. I left as a victor in court. Today I stand for every student denied justice by silence. Behind me, the Phoenix mosaic glowed under the spotlights. Then, in a twist, no one saw coming. Representative Turner, a retired Army officer, moved by my testimony, rose to co-sponsor. The chamber hummed with surprise. Privilege had met its match. As the committee prepared to vote, calm clarity settled over me. This was less about signing a bill and more about igniting conscience. Each mosaic fragment I'd glimpsed was a voice demanding to be heard. The screens replayed my courtroom victory, my disciplined roundhouse kick, echoing in every frame. Yet the true verdict lay in the balance. Beneath the carved eagle of the dome, I felt the weight of every student who'd ever been silenced, every educator who'd looked the other way. Justice, I knew, isn't sealed by gavel alone, it's forged by collective courage. The legislators took their seats and doors closed. My heart thundered. In that breath before the debate began, I understood the next moment would decide not just Aisha's Law, but whether a generation's voices would be heard or hushed forever. I never imagined letting go would be the hardest fight of all, I whispered, as I stood before the glass wall of Yale University's art gallery, the morning sun casting long beams across my newest installation. A towering mosaic of phoenix feathers, assembled from the shattered scraps of my past portfolio. Each shard of paper told a story of threats of silence, of pain, and together they rose into a brilliant bird of rebirth. Behind me, visitors murmured in awe, their footsteps soft against the polished stone floor. This was the culmination of my journey from terrified student to advocate, yet in my chest, a familiar tremor of uncertainty lingered. Months had passed since the state capitol voting session turned Aisha's Law into reality. The classroom assemblies, the self-defense workshops, The endless rounds of testimony all had woven a tapestry of change that stretched far beyond Westfield Prep. Teens I'd never met in Tokyo and Sao Paulo had written to share how they found their voices. Parents in small towns had reported fewer incidents of harassment because they knew there was a law to protect them. But here, amid ivy-covered halls and colonial brick facades, I felt the weight of expectations shifting onto my shoulders. Could I use this platform to inspire even greater transformation? As I guided a group of freshmen through the gallery, I watched their eyes flick from the phoenix's wings to the battered self-portrait scrap pinned at its base. It was the same single eye I clutched in the courthouse, now reimagined as the seed of every flame that rose from injustice. This eye, I told them, voice steady, witnessed the worst of power. It demanded accountability. And here, we honor the promise that no one's story ends in silence. Their nods were small but fierce. I recognized that look, that flash of courage, because I'd worn it myself. Then came the twist. I hadn't foreseen. A soft applause swelled behind me, and as I turned, I saw Tyler Brooks and Des Johnson stepping out of the crowd, each holding a new canvas. Tyler's painting was raw, a study in grays and blues, capturing the moment he tossed my laptop aside in shame. Des's sculpture twisted metal and glass into a cage bursting open at one corner. They moved forward together, offering their art as apologies and affirmations. In that instant, privilege and remorse melded into something unexpected, true solidarity. My breath caught and I felt tears sting my eyes, not from grief, but from the beauty of collective redemption. The Phoenix mosaic trembled as though stirred by their steps. "We're in this with you," Tyler said, voice rough. "We're not perfect, but we choose to fight for what's right." The gallery's skylight framed them like stained glass saints of change. In the silence that followed, I realized justice wasn't static. It was living art, ever evolving, nourished by every act of courage. As the freshmen pressed forward, reaching to touch the Phoenix's feathers, I understood that my story wasn't the final chapter. It was a spark. Even as applause began to ripple through the hall, I saw beyond the crowd a world still in need of transformation. Hands waiting to pick up the torch, voices waiting to rise. Clutching the scrap of inked eye at my heart, I stepped back, letting the mosaic's fire spread, knowing this revolution had only just begun.